The sun blazed over the land of Canaan as Joseph walked through the fields, his multicolored robe flowing in the wind. He was 17, full of dreams, and his father's favorite, and everyone knew it. His brothers, hardened men who had spent their lives working the land and tending flocks, watched him with growing resentment. They hated him. Jacob, their father, had never hidden his favoritism. He loved Joseph more than all his sons, the firstborn of his beloved wife Rachel. And the robe, the fine, beautiful robe of many colors, was proof of it. Every time Joseph passed, his brothers saw their father's love for him and felt their own rage boiling inside. But Joseph's arrogance only made it worse. One morning, he stood before them, his eyes burning with excitement. "I had a dream," he said. His voice carried an innocent confidence, but his words dripped with insult. "We were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to mine." His brothers stared at him. Then, laughter bitter and cruel. "Do you think you will rule over us?" Simeon sneered. "Do you think you are our king?" Joseph didn't back down. Days later, another dream came, and once again, he told them, "I saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing before me." Even Jacob, his father, was troubled this time. "What is this dream?" he asked. "Shall I, your mother, and your brothers really bow before you?" Joseph fell silent, but inside he knew. His dreams were no ordinary dreams. They meant something. The hatred in his brothers' hearts deepened. Days passed, and Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were grazing their flocks near Shechem. As he journeyed across the fields, his multicolored robe shimmered in the sun, making him easy to spot from a distance. His brothers saw him coming. Their moment had arrived. "Here comes the dreamer," one of them spat. "Let's kill him," another growled. "Throw him into a pit and tell father a wild beast devoured him." Their hearts were set on murder. But Reuben, the eldest, hesitated. "No, we won't kill him. Let's throw him into this pit alive," he said, planning to rescue Joseph later and return him to their father. Joseph arrived, smiling, unaware of their dark intentions. Before he could speak, hands grabbed him. Rough hands, angry hands. They tore the multicolored robe from his body, the very symbol of his father's love, and flung him into the deep, dark pit. He hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his body. Dust filled his lungs. He cried out to them, begged them. But they only laughed. Above him, the sky darkened as his brothers sat down to eat, ignoring his cries. Then, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared in the distance, their camels loaded with spices and goods for Egypt. Judah's eyes gleamed with opportunity. "What do we gain by killing him? Let's sell him instead." The deal was struck. Joseph, still pleading for his life, was dragged from the pit. His hands were bound. 20 pieces of silver exchanged hands, and before he could resist, the traders led him away, a slave bound for Egypt. Reuben returned later, intending to free his brother, but the pit was empty. Joseph was gone. He tore his garments in grief. "The boy is no more. What will I do?" Panic set in. They needed a cover story. Killing a goat, they dipped Joseph's robe in its blood and brought it to Jacob. "Father, we found this," they lied, their faces full of false sorrow. "Is this your son's robe?" Jacob took it in trembling hands. The bloodstains told him all he needed to know. His beloved son was dead. He tore his clothes, fell to the ground, and wept. "I will mourn him until the day I die." Meanwhile, Joseph, betrayed, enslaved, and utterly alone, was being dragged toward Egypt, his father grieving, his brothers celebrating, and his dreams seemingly shattered. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Thank you, and see you soon. The scorching Egyptian sun beat down on Joseph's back as he stumbled forward, his wrists bound with thick ropes. The Ishmaelite traders dragged him through the crowded streets of Egypt, past towering statues, golden palaces, and the scent of foreign spices. His throat was dry. His heart pounded. Just days ago, he had been his father's favorite son. Now, he was nothing. A slave. The traders pulled him into the slave market. Men and women stood in chains, their faces hollow, their futures uncertain. Joseph felt the eyes of wealthy Egyptians examining him, discussing his price like he was livestock. Then a tall, imposing man stepped forward. Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. He studied Joseph with an unreadable expression. "I'll take this one," he said. And just like that, Joseph was sold again. Potiphar's household was unlike anything Joseph had ever seen. Grand, disciplined, ruthless. As a slave, Joseph was expected to work endlessly. But he was not like the others. Yahweh was with him. Everything Joseph touched prospered. He worked with diligence, his mind sharp, his hands skilled. Potiphar noticed. "There is something different about this one," he murmured to his wife. Over time, Joseph rose through the ranks of the household. Potiphar trusted him completely, putting him in charge of everything. He had food, fine clothes, authority. It was not freedom, but it was a life. Until she noticed him. Potiphar's wife. Beautiful, cunning, dangerous. She watched Joseph with hungry eyes. She saw his strength, his confidence, the way he carried himself. And she wanted him. One day, as Joseph was tending to his duties, she approached him. "Lie with me," she whispered, her voice dripping with desire. Joseph stepped back immediately, his heart racing. "No, my lady," he said firmly. "My master trusts me with everything. How could I betray him? How could I sin against Yahweh?" But she wasn't used to hearing no. Day after day she pursued him. She whispered in his ear when no one was looking. She reached for him when he walked by. But Joseph refused her every time. Then came the day of the trap. The house was empty. The other servants were gone. Joseph entered to complete his work, unaware that she was waiting, alone. She stepped in front of him, blocking his way. Her eyes burned with obsession. She grabbed him by his cloak. "Lie with me," she commanded. Joseph ripped himself free, his cloak tearing in her hands, and ran. But she was not a woman who accepted defeat. Fury twisted her face as she screamed. The guards rushed in. He tried to attack me," she cried, holding his cloak as evidence. "He came to take advantage of me, but I screamed, and he ran." Lies. All lies. Potiphar stormed in. His eyes, once filled with trust, were now cold as stone. He looked at Joseph. This Hebrew slave he had elevated, trusted, and saw nothing but betrayal. "Take him to the dungeons," he growled. Joseph didn't fight. He didn't scream. He had been here before, betrayed, falsely accused, thrown into a pit. The iron doors slammed shut behind him, chains clamped onto his wrists. The darkness swallowed him whole. Once again, Joseph had lost everything. But even in the depths of the prison, he did not know. Yahweh was still with him. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Thank you, and see you soon. The stench of damp stone filled Joseph's lungs as he lay on the cold prison floor, chains biting into his wrists. The walls around him were thick, unyielding. A dungeon beneath Pharaoh's palace, a place where men were sent to be forgotten. But Yahweh had not forgotten him. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Joseph did not break. Even in prison he worked. He served. He remained faithful, and Yahweh was with him. The prison keeper took notice. "This Hebrew, he is different," he murmured. Soon Joseph was placed in charge of the other prisoners. He had no power, no freedom, but somehow he held authority even in chains. Then one day, 2 new prisoners were thrown into the cell, a man with proud, sharp eyes and another with hands that trembled. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker. Joseph watched them carefully. One morning, he noticed their troubled faces. "What is wrong?" he asked. The cupbearer sighed. "We both had dreams last night, but there is no one here to interpret them." Joseph stepped forward. "Interpretations belong to Yahweh. Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer spoke first. "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. The branches blossomed and bore ripe grapes. I took Pharaoh's cup, pressed the grapes into it, and placed it in Pharaoh's hand." Joseph's eyes gleamed. Yahweh had given him the answer. "This is the meaning," he said. "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position. You will serve him once again as you did before." The cupbearer's eyes widened. "If this is true," Joseph pleaded, "remember me when you are free. Speak to Pharaoh. Help me get out of this place." Then the baker spoke, his voice low with fear. "I too had a dream," he said. "I saw 3 baskets of bread on my head. Birds came and ate the bread from the baskets." Joseph's face darkened. He took a slow breath. The meaning was clear. "The 3 baskets are 3 days," he said. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will execute you. The birds will feed on your flesh." A heavy silence filled the prison. 3 days passed. And then, just as Joseph had said, Pharaoh summoned the 2 men. The cupbearer was restored to his position, standing once again at Pharaoh's side. But the baker was taken to the gallows. His life was over. Joseph waited. Surely now the cupbearer would speak of him. Surely now freedom would come. But the cupbearer forgot him. Joseph remained in that prison. 1 year, 2 years, forgotten. Until one night, Pharaoh awoke drenched in sweat. He had dreamed of 7 fat cows grazing peacefully, only to be devoured by 7 thin, sickly cows. Then he saw 7 full heads of grain swallowed by 7 shriveled ones. Pharaoh's heart pounded. He called his magicians, his wise men. "Tell me what this means," he demanded. But none could answer. Then, a spark of memory flashed in the cupbearer's mind. "My lord Pharaoh, I have sinned," he admitted. 2 years ago, when I was in prison, I met a Hebrew. He interpreted my dream, and it came true. He can interpret yours." Pharaoh's eyes narrowed. "Bring him to me. Now." The prison doors creaked open. For the first time in years, light touched Joseph's face. He was pulled from the darkness, hurried through the palace, bathed, dressed, prepared. And then, he stood before Pharaoh. The most powerful man in the world stared at this Hebrew prisoner, a man once betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, cast into a dungeon. "I have heard you can interpret dreams," Pharaoh said. Joseph lifted his head. His moment had come. "I cannot," he said. The room fell silent. But Yahweh can. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, share, like, and comment. Thank you, and see you soon.